Like, I'm gonna impregnate your slice of bread with my beef extract. Yuck! Hello, welcome to Silent Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I am doing one of my old school science fiction, classic sci-fi book reviews, and I'm doing Michael Moorcock's The Winds of Limbo. Oh, no! Yeah, the cover fell off. I got this from a used bookstore, and obviously I bought it because of the cover, because, like, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Like, move over Pennywise, like, As usual, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, and I'm going to talk about the technology, and then I'm going to drop into my analysis part of the review where I'm going to have tons of spoilers, and I'm going to talk about race and women and the political aspects and what he's trying to say with this novel. The novel is from 1965, so that makes it... How old am I? That makes it 55 years old. That's great. So it's not really a sci-fi. The novel is more of a speculative political thriller about a man attempting to understand why he and the population of the megacity he lives in are drawn towards this strange man called only the Fire Clown. That's pretty much the plot as well. It's set in Switzerland, which is now this huge multi-leveled city, in 2095. Humans pretty much just live in these big cities over the world, and everything is peaceful. Then comes this upstart named the Fire Clown, who is whipping people into a frenzy with his strange anarchist speeches. So Administrative Officer Alan and his presidential hopeful girlfriend Helen work together to unearth a plot surrounding the Fire Clown and Helen's, political rivals. It's simultaneously slow and fascinating. It's an interesting yet underdeveloped speculative political thriller, as I said. It's clearly a commentary on government systems at the time he was writing in the 60s, focusing on a sort of anti-establishment take on class disparity. Unfortunately, the message is pretty much lost because we're not shown the other classes at all and why they are suffering, and the only corruption is of a very small subset of the government. In 2021, the whole one bad guy, taking over mentality rings very hollow, given what we know about the breadth of corruption at the top of governmental systems. This book has passed its time, I think. Likewise, what's my chair doing? Likewise, we don't get enough of the setting to really understand how the super city, which is called Swiss City, which reminds me of Swiss Chalet for some reason, functions or is organized. And the political figures are running for re-election of the entire world. Why are they only campaigning in one city? And how can Helen, who is up for president of the world, just take off for days at a time into space? It's a pivotal moment in her re-election campaign. I don't know how she can just be like, yeah, sure, I'll take off with you. It doesn't make any sense. In terms of the characters, I was impressed with the number of women in positions of power in male-dominated spaces. That was surprising to me. It was a long way from gender parity, but it was far better than I expected. Alan is not the most likable character. He's both wishy-washy and demanding, and he's kind of a hard protagonist to care for. Helen isn't much better, though. She's not very deep. Though the point of the novel, I'm pretty sure, is the concepts rather than the characters. I understood everyone's motivations, even the villain and the Fire Clown, but none of them were that memorable as people. Even the Fire Clown isn't that memorable. I did enjoy the twist with the Fire Clown as well as his backstory. There are some outdated notions that just don't ring true today, like illegitimate births. Who gives a crap about that now? I don't know. Overall, while the book wasn't terrible by any means, dare I say it came off a bit half Moorcocked. I'm so funny. So after that terrible joke, I'm going to talk about the technology and some kind of funny future assumptions. That's kind of my favorite part about this, is seeing what people in the 60s thought we would be like in the future. So on top of spaceships and super cities, there are some really fun technologies here. There's voice-activated lights and a mellow lamp for reading. There's no computers apparently or tablets or anything like that, but they have a video calling system called a laser vid. Apparently the TV, they have TV too, but apparently the TV and the video calling were part of the same device. So you'd be watching a show and then someone would call and interrupt you, their face would just pop up on the screen. It doesn't appear like you'd have to accept the call, the call would just begin. What? What if you were in an intimate moment? What if you were like sitting there with like just your bra and your sweatpants on, like, you know, a lot of us do, and your like boss calls? Like, what the heck? Anyway, there's also this thing called talkie posters, which are just moving posters, I guess, like billboard ads playing on TV. I'm not really sure. It's not really explained. I mean, we kind of have that now. Like, there's tons of like TV ads if you go to big cities. Sometimes it's hard to remember that in 1965, like, TV was barely a thing, let alone the screens that we have now. Like, I bought this smart TV for $75 on Black Friday one year to use with my treadmill, and now my husband uses it as a monitor at work, and that TV alone would probably blow someone from the 60s minds, because it's, you know, it's a flat screen and it's a smart TV. I don't know. It's just funny to think it's funny to remember that how different things were like 50 years ago. The city is solar powered, which I thought was really cool. And there's my favorite line from the book. Offering his boss a slice of bread impregnated with beef extract. It sounds so incredibly dirty. Like, I'm gonna impregnate your slice of bread with my beef extract. Yuck! It's so gross. Anyway, also it sounds disgusting. And this isn't really tech, but no one smokes cigarettes in this future. They do smoke weed. Nice. When one woman does, you know, pull out a pack, Alan stares at her because he's never seen a nicotine addict before. It actually comes up quite often. Let's see, I thought I had it here. Yeah. So they're talking, Helen's doing a press conference, so this is clearly a political thriller. What steps does Miss Curtis intend to take towards present ban on tobacco production? None, Helen said firmly. There are 2 reasons for keeping the ban. The first is that nicotine is harmful to health. The second is that land previously used for tobacco is now producing cereals and other food products. Marijuana, on the other hand, is not nearly so habit-forming, has fewer smokers, and can be produced with less wastage of land. Yeah. It's all true. Thanks, Helen. Second last thing, I think this is hilarious because of how insulting it is and how untrue it likely will be. So this is his kind of take on religion in the future. What did he say here? Okay, so these people show up and then he says, "We have come as the voice of the Latter-day Adventists to denounce you." The Latter-day Adventists were now the strongest and only influential religious body in existence today, and their ranks were comprised so obviously of bewildered half-wits and pious paranoiacs that public and politicians alike did not pay them the attention that such a large movement would otherwise merit in a democracy. However, they could be a nuisance. Tell us how you really feel about organized religion, Michael Moorcock. That is hilarious. And lastly, so every book, it seems like every book almost that I read, every classic sci-fi talks about microfiche. They all think microfiche is going to survive into the future and somehow be the main way that we get information. Onwards to the analysis portion. So thank you for watching. If you don't want any spoilers, you can stop here. I do recommend this book. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. And I recommend it to anybody that likes classic science fiction. I think it's an early Michael Moorcock, and if you like him, you'll probably like this. I mean, it's not... I've read a couple of his other ones in the past, and this is definitely not as good as those, but, I mean, I think it was the start of his career. So I recommend it. I do like it, and just to have the cover. The cover, again, is absolutely fantastic. So my analysis portion. So if you don't know, Michael Moorcock is still alive. He's 81. Since he started writing, he's been heavily involved in sci-fi and the writing world, helping to pioneer cyberpunk, and he's been writing dozens and dozens of novels and novellas and short stories, some of which have won awards. He is also heavily involved in music as well. He actually has some songs on Spotify. It's kind of folksy rock like Neil Young. Just search for Michael Moorcock and I can't remember what the band is, just search for Michael Moorcock. He actually released a song like last year. Anyway, it's actually pretty good. I didn't know this, but I find it kind of hilarious. So Michael Moorcock is somewhat dismissive of the works of J.R. Tolkien. Apparently he's met both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis when he was in his teens, and he said that they're really nice people, but he doesn't admire them on artistic grounds. Apparently he criticized, The Lord of the Rings for its Merry England point of view, and he compared it to Winnie the Pooh. I'm dying. As someone who's not a Lord of the Rings fan, as I mentioned before on this channel, it's nice to feel validated by someone who's actually like an accomplished author. So I rather like Michael Moorcock. He's also deeply political, which I'm on board with because his politicalness kind of fits with mine. In the past, he's criticized writers for their political agendas, including Robert Heinlein and H.P. Lovecraft. So he wrote this essay in 1978 called Starship Stormtroopers. So he was really criticizing kind of the raw military aspect of that book in particular, as well as other sci-fi writers. I'm not a fan of Heinlein myself, and the movie Starship Troopers is way better. I also think that he would have enjoyed. He probably watched it. He probably enjoyed it because it's satirizing the book and the military. So he also criticized Lovecraft, as we all know now, for anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and extremely racist viewpoints that he kind of wove into his short stories. It sucks because H.P. Lovecraft's books are so rich in their mythology. But it's so frustrating when an author not only is, problematic, but includes that stuff in their writing. It's like, how can I enjoy this how can I enjoy this when I know what the intent was? Anyway, that's I think all readers and movie watchers and everybody that indulges in media has this issue at some point, and I struggle with it a lot. So you can sum up Michael Moorcock's views in this one quote. I'm an anarchist and a pragmatist. My moral philosophical position is that of an anarchist. My books deal frequently with aristocratic heroes, gods, and so forth. All of them end on a note which often states quite directly that one should serve neither gods nor masters, but become one's own master. Yeah, I can get behind that. I'm on board for Michael Moorcock. That came off really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 things in this novel. So first I'm going to talk about women. Overall, I don't have a lot to be annoyed about in this book regarding women. In fact, Moorcock is definitely, was an ally to women even back then, in that he helped move this particularly violent and degrading fantasy series about women called Gore. I will not be reviewing this book or the series. He helped get it off the main shelves and into the pornography section where it belongs. In fact, I would argue that degrading and degrading and sexual assault should not be part of pornography either, but at least it wasn't on the mainstream shelves for impressionable, at the time, boys to pick up. Anyway, so on the spectrum of Sean Connery, James Bond movies' treatment of women to Fury Road, this is a fifth element. So women have agency and purpose and aren't victimized, but still a bit dated in some respects and doesn't pass the Bechdel test. So women in this novel are not hypersexualized at all. There are women with jobs and careers and agency and personality. There is only one female main character, and though she does talk to another woman at one point, they're talking about the fire clown, so it doesn't pass the Bechdel test because they're talking about a dude. Helen, Curtis, the main character, she's running for president, which is pretty cool, and it doesn't seem like she's facing any misogyny from anyone, which presupposes humanity has moved past this mentality, which is a nice thought. Her getting with Alan also doesn't feel like a prize. What the heck? Her getting with Alan also doesn't feel like a prize for him at the end, which sometimes happens in sci-fi books. Like you'll have the hot, coworker or the hot, fellow scientist or whatever, and then in the end she gets with the guy when it seems like there's no basis for it. In this book, they've already had a relationship, and it felt normal that they would get together, even though I don't understand her choice. There are some little things here and there which are just kind of funny because they're from the time period. So one is more of a personality flaw of Alan's than I think of Moorcock's actual perspective, because all the issues I have with Alan come from his thoughts and not from the omniscient narration. So Alan is so annoying when it comes to Helen. He loves her, he claims, but he doesn't like her career choice. He hated the political side of her character. Whereas he had nothing against women in politics, it would have been atavistic and unrealistic if he had an objection. He felt that her talents lay elsewhere. If it's been a one-off thing, okay, fine. But he brings this up a bunch of times, and at one point he says to her, "Why don't you just start painting again? You know what you're doing in that field. Really, even I know more about politics than you do." Excuse me. This woman is running for president of the world, and you're like, "I know more about politics. You should be a painter." Man, get over yourself. This is from a man who professes to ignore politics on principle because he doesn't like them. Shut up, Alan. God. Why Helen marries him is beyond me. Blech. We do get a men writing women moment. If you've seen these on Twitter or on the internet, they're where male writers, describe women in ridiculous ways, usually their breasts. I haven't come across too many of these, actually, in my classic sci-fis, unless you count the entirety of Piers Anthony's Castle Rugna, which is the absolute worst book I've ever read. I might do a review of it where I tear it apart if people would find that funny, because that book is atrociously bad on so many levels. Anyway, this one isn't too egregious. It's actually quite funny. So they aren't going to have, this is not a precursor to them having sex. They're just talking about politics. So she was staring at him, her mouth slightly open, her breasts moving beneath her lacy bodice as she breathed. What does that even mean? They're moving? They're like, woo! I don't understand. It just seemed like a kind of, I don't really get what he was trying to say. They're like, is she like hyperventilating? I don't know. And there is a pretty funny part that, it's not that bad, but it's pretty funny. So these women show up. I think they were one of those religious women that I talked about earlier. The women would have been prettier if they had dressed less dowdily and paid more attention to their hair and makeup. In a word, they were frumps. I just died. I'm like, oh my god. Oh my god. I also felt personally attacked because I don't pay any attention to my hair and makeup unless it's for these videos or I'm going to like a wedding. So I guess I'm a frump, but I'm pretty sure anyone would agree with that. So I'll take it. I don't care. But yeah, honestly, pretty good regarding women. Thanks, Mike. I do want to talk about race for a second, because there's not too much to say, except that the book tries to be post-racial while also using a racial slur. So it's one of those kind of bizarre, like, oh, okay. There's a couple people of color in the book. One guy named Jannar. He's referred to quite often as a very archaic word for an African-American person. I'm not comfortable saying it, though it's not the N-word, but it's the less pejorative version of that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think that was a pretty normal word to use to describe a black person, but, it does make me feel uncomfortable when I see it. There is another character, a minor character called Tristan Balua, who is from Zimbabwe and the manager of City Works. So I thought that was great that he was trying to show that people of different races, it wasn't just like white people at the top, even though I think all the people that were running for president were. Apparently Zimbabwe in this book has grown into a world power and it's the head of the African Federation. So I think this book it's trying hard to show like a post-racial future, but it just had one particular word use that is a product of its time. So it was one of those kind of interesting kind of contradictions in terms of race. And I thought it handled race pretty well in that, no one was scapegoated or stereotypical, and yeah, pretty good. I'm going to talk a little bit about the other concepts, kind of the political concepts. So, as you know, from my explanation, Michael Moorcock was very political. So let's take a deep dive. He's clearly positing with this book that big government is an unwieldy and corruptive force that turns reasonable people power-hungry and willing to kill others to cement their power. I mean, we all knew this, but yeah. We see this in Powys clearly. He wants to cement his legacy by getting his daughter to marry someone who isn't from the working class. Apparently being a pilot, a pilot in the military is part of the working class in this world. And so, he tries to murder the fire clown back when his name was, I can't remember what his name was, back when he was just like a regular dude, before he went all Joker-fied. And then he also, obviously, he's the main bad guy in the book where he orchestrates this whole arms deal, blow up the city scapegoat plot to get himself elected. So, yeah, it's pretty obvious what he's trying to say there. It also seems like Moorcock was trying to bring up class concerns in the novel, with the whole thing with the fire clown being a different class and then the lower levels getting all burned up. But I think he was trying to show how the poor suffer when the richer leaders play their political games. But it wasn't clear enough. Like, I usually don't like didactic stories, but it wasn't obvious enough. I mean, most of the novel is Alan wandering around aimlessly and the fire clown spouting off speeches. That part of the novel was very didactic, yet it was unspecific what he was trying to actually say with these speeches. I was like, I don't really understand the point. I do wonder if Moorcock sees himself represented in the fire clown, because he's clearly this anarchist, anti-establishment character. He does have some interesting lines that I thought were worth talking about. On the topic of police violence, which, is very topical today, these days the police force required superior intelligence and education to get into it, and modern police weren't the good-for-nothing-else characters of the past. This clearly is not going in that trajectory. I will say nothing else. So he also has this weird scene where there's this man who owns the slum housing district in London that he allows the homeless to live in, albeit in squalor, like he doesn't provide them with proper housing, and he refuses to sell the land to the government. Yet the people that live here are said to reject the kind of UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, that the country has set up. But I'm not really sure what the whole point of that was. Like, what's he trying to say with that? He's trying to say, like, this man, is it good that this man lets the homeless live in this squalor? Like, what? I don't really understand what the point of that was. Maybe it was just like a setting thing, but given how political he is, I figured it had some kind of point behind it. But I couldn't figure out what it was. The final line of the book should be more resonant, but I don't really see how it applies to the story as a whole, because we only see one riot in the city, and it didn't appear that the Fire Clown had that many supporters. The line is, perhaps the world had just been bored. But the novel doesn't really talk about, like, is he trying to say that people are dumb, and they don't like political stability, that people want... I don't really understand what he's trying to say with that. Yeah, there's one thing we agree on, and that is, listening to this conversation, his faith in the stupidity of human nature was fully restored. That is something I can definitely get behind. Because I find that all the time. Every time I leave my house, I'm like, humans. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Check out The Winds of Limbo, because it's quite interesting. And yeah, thanks.